Now, this one is different in many respects, you know, because even this one, the story discovered me. You see, stories find me. I don't go out and say, hey, now I want to write an American novel. No, I don't do that. I don't say, oh, today I read somewhere, somebody, what the name? The Cock, what? The critics.
Critics.
A critic says, now you must write a novel set somewhere else. Now let me write a novel set. No. A story discovers me. I'm out there minding my own business. I'm walking there in the street, minding my own business. Then a story comes to me and it says to me, I'm a story, narrate me. And then I say, okay, I'll narrate you then. You see? That's what I do. And I don't say, oh, well, story, you are in America and I'm South African, I'm not going to narrate you. I don't do that. I narrate it, whether it's in America or wherever. Because, you see, I believe that as an artist, I create art, you know. And I'm not a provincial artist. I create art wherever it demands to be created. Yeah. Now, how did this one demand to be created? That was the question.
That was my question.
Yes. Well, but
it was my next question, actually. Was
I've got to give the background.
I know.
You see that? Because your first question was very general. So I'm giving a general background. You see?
It was a general question for general background.
For a general background.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now what happened then about this specific story? It was important to contrast it with the first novel that I wrote that's set in America and how it is different from this one. This one, what happened was on a Thanksgiving day, driving from a town called Yellow Springs, which is very famous as a hippie town. When we talk of hippies, we're talking of real hippies. I mean, not what is South Africa you want hippies. I mean, the hippies of the 60s.
Are they still there?
Yes, but I mean, they're old now.
I only know, you know the guy who used to, he was called Wavy Gravy.
Oh, what?
Wavy Gravy.
Oh,
he was one of the most famous hippies.
Oh, I see.
He used to feed everyone. He used to drive around in a combi and just make food for everyone.
Exactly. You still find people like that who are remnants of that movement and haven't changed their lifestyle. You see, they still live that hippie life, but now they are concentrated in certain towns, and those towns then are known, you know, for their population of, you know, aging hippies, you know. Yellow Springs is one of those towns. We like going there a lot because there's a lot of art that happens there. You will find them basking in the streets of Yellow Springs. But then also they create a lot of different art there. And you know, what's happening there is very reminiscent of what used to happen in the 60s, but now in a very different way. So we were driving from there. You see, why I mentioned the hippies is because that part of that culture features in this novel. You see. So coming from Yellow Springs, then I'm listening in the radio. I hear a story of a rapist who is now fighting for paternity rights over the rape-conceived child. Now, this is a fascinating story. You know? I'm now thinking, really? Is this possible? Is a rapist fighting for paternity rights? Is that allowed? Allowed by whom? Does the law allow that sort of thing? But now I'm also thinking at the level of the humans themselves who are involved. You know, the child, but especially the woman. You know. And I'm thinking now of the trauma of that whole, you know, that whole process. And I think this sounds like a novel I would want to write. Then I discovered that, in fact, in Ohio and in some other states in America, there are no specific laws that would stop that kind of thing from happening. And indeed, it has been known to happen before, whereby a rapist has gone out of his way to say, okay, now I want visitation rights. You see. Now I even want custody of the child. And then I investigated these issues and discovered, you know, which states, there are states where there are specific laws. You know. For instance, in Louisiana, there are specific laws where it is explicitly stated if, you know, somebody has been convicted of, in other words, there is proof that he is a rapist, and that proof may be, well, it has to be through conviction, obviously. But you know that in America there are other ways of proving besides conviction, because conviction needs, you know, beyond reasonable doubt. When beyond reasonable doubt fails, even put in civil action, you see, which does not need beyond reasonable doubt. You know. That also can be proved, you see, that somebody, and therefore that is good enough that, you know, I mean, as evidence that, well, this is, you know, this person is the rapist. So that's where this story comes from. But now you're asking about the setting, the community. The community where this is set, of course, is Southeast Ohio, which is not far from the community of the setting of Zion, but it's not the Wind people, you see. It's more of the community which disparagingly is called, the people will be called the hillbilly people, which is derogatory, I would call them that. Although they do call themselves that, which does not give you permission to call them that, you know. They call them that, you know, in the same way that, I mean, to take that word and disempower it. In the same way that, you know, some black folks who call themselves niggers or, you know, and so on. Maybe that answers your question. Well,
I think it gets closer to answering the question.
I will be brief next time.
I think the thing that struck me more than anything else, I mean, partly it's to do with the Wing people are fascinating in and of themselves. Before I read San, it was a community I had no idea about at all. I mean, there's extraordinary events which led to the creation of this community. But the thing that I really enjoyed about Rachel's Blue was the fact that, certainly in my sort of understanding of, or my idea of the states, although I know it's called the United States and is therefore quite obviously a collection of states which have been united, it's this idea that there are different laws in different states, and therefore, just like the Wing people were created from a similar situation, if you like, which is that these people could find a state where they weren't going to be enslaved, or they could find a place where they could escape to. Once again, in Rachel's Blue, you have Rachel who herself is in that position, and then she has to escape to another state to try and get away from what's actually happening to her. But I had no idea that, I mean, it was even possible that this piece of legislation, well, it's not a piece of legislation, it's a lack of a piece of legislation. And when I read the novel the first time, I couldn't believe that nobody had ever said, well, you know, that's kind of wrong. You know, that nobody had ever stood up in a court, nobody, or if people had stood up in a court of law and said, this is insane, you know, a rapist cannot get custody of a child, that's ridiculous. That they'd been shouted down, or that had never been. I mean, are there people challenging this in the States?
Oh yes, I mean, they. Although I would say there's a broad movement and so on, you know. I think because it's not a common thing. I mean, you don't find rapists all over America wanting their children. It is not something that happens usually. You see that. So that is why you don't hear much of it and so on. That is why I mean, there's no movement that is, you know, fighting that there should be such laws. You see. But there are people there are advocates, for instance. I mean, that's how also this came to my attention actually, is because there are women who have gone through this sort of thing and who are now advocating for action in those states that there are no laws that protect women who, you see, usually in many cases, women who have been raped and then get pregnant, they opt for abortion. It's very rare for them to want to keep the baby. But once in a while, a woman wants to keep that baby. You see? Rachel Blue actually goes through that process. This character, you know, debates. There's a time when she wants to go through abortion. And we go through the reasons, you see. And then there's a time when she decides to keep the baby. And when a woman decides to keep the baby, there are reasons even there, you see. And we go through all that. You see, I went into thorough research when I wrote this novel. Through all, you know, the the trauma that these people go through. Yes. But having said that also, are there such laws in South Africa, for instance?
Well, I don't know. That's interesting.
You see, I don't know either. I was asking friends of mine about that only last night. You see, I don't know if there are laws yet, that would prohibit that. If, for instance, a rapist would fight for custody or visitation rights, over a rape conceived child. Are there laws which say, okay, this will not be allowed to happen? Yeah. I don't know. In the states where there are no laws of that nature, it is because that is inconceivable normally, But now that it has been known to happen, some states do have laws.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also opens up. I mean, I know that rape conviction for rape globally is very low. I mean, I know in the UK it's about 4%.
You mean conviction?
Yeah, conviction for rape in the UK I think is 4% of cases.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's very, very low globally. I know that, and I think that's the other thing which, for me, the book raised, which was, even if you do have a legal system, and obviously we're talking about a small minority of potential rapists who then want to, who want custody of their children. But even if you have a legal system which potentially was not going to allow this, there must be a lot of women out there. There must be women out there who have either gone to court and failed to actually get a conviction against somebody and have ended up in a sim. So I think it's just the fact that this is actually, that you heard about this case, that this case, I think it's actually probably more common than you would imagine, because legally you're still not going, I mean, you're saying in the States you can go through you can bring a civil movement essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, which is something slightly different. But it's still going to be, I mean, I think that's the other thing that this book, by not actually talking about the wider issues, is what this book brought to me, especially in the South African context. So all of a sudden you're saying, okay, well this is a very particular case, but it brings up all of these questions about how we deal with rapists and how we see people who bring charges against various people within our communities. And I think that's what was very interesting for me. And especially because this is essentially the community that you're writing about. It's essentially a white community.
Yeah, and it is also an extremely dysfunctional community. And it's a community that we know very well. By we, now I'm talking about my family. Because, well, I live in a university town, myself, which is an oasis because of it, as a university town, with all the facilities, and it is well off, it's a very prestigious kind of university. It's an oasis, but in the middle of poverty in southeast Ohio. That's a very poor region. Maybe even the poorest region. Well, maybe I won't say the poorest in America, but very, very poor in the Appalachian region. You have heard of the Appalachian Mountains. Yes, and all the neighboring places, mostly villages, but towns also, small towns, are very depressed. They used to be coal mining towns, in years gone by. But they ran out of coal many years ago. And there are no jobs, people are unemployed, there's no industry, and there's nothing there. And people depend mostly on food stamps and so on. And therefore, the families there are highly dysfunctional. And there's a lot of domestic violence, a lot of meth, drugs, and broken families. My wife works there as a psychotherapist. And she comes across these cases, which are, you see, this Rachel Blue case and so on, and her neighbors that I'm writing about. Those are real people that we come across, you see. The poverty that I write about here, actually, is real. It is the side of America that many people, for instance, it's South Africa here, don't know about. Because South Africans, their America is the America of the bold and the beautiful. And, the America of the movies. So, that is, the whole picture. That's where you find things like that. But also, these are close-knit families. That is why when Rachel is raped and has a baby, then this guy, of course, is in jail. Then the father of the guy says, well, if then you say this is our son's child, then this is our child. We are fighting to have this child. You see? We must have custody of this child. You see? It's all with the grandfathers and all that. It's like it's exactly like that. They are very traditional kind of families, you see.
So I'm gonna ask you a question you were asked last night, which I think is a really interesting thing, because I know that when you started to write this book, you were on Twitter. And as anyone who knows and follows you on Twitter, they know you have a number of followers. How many do you have now?
No, there are not that many.
It's about 60,000. About 60, isn't it?
I'll tell you now, James.
It's 50-something thousand, surely.
54,500.
54,500. Just a few people.
Are you looking at it and
Did you not know?
I'm tweeting your every word, sir.
Oh, I see.
As you speak, straight into the stratosphere.
But are you tweeting accurately though? Or are you mistweeting me?
She is my editor. She says she's tweeting accurately.
Oh, I see.
I like the way you have somebody just to make sure that it's all okay.
Okay.
So most of those people obviously you know personally, the 54,000.
Well, a lot of them I do, yeah.
So when you started to write this novel, you decided that, or you got into an exchange with a certain person. And can you tell us the main character, the rapist in the story, is surname is de Klerk.
Okay.
And there aren't a huge number of de Klerks in the area we're talking about. So where did he come from? Where did this guy come from?
Oh, I see. No. You see, okay. What happened was, I told you again already.
You did. But you didn't tell these people.
Yes, no. I told you that I discovered this story when I was in the car, coming back from from Yellow Springs. So after hearing this thing, I got so excited. Because you see, when a story discovers me, I told you, stories discover me. A story discovers me, then I get excited. Then I start tweeting, you see. I'm stupid that way. I start tweeting. I say, hey, I've discovered a story that I'm going to write in my next novel. Okay, my tweet says, out of the blue, I've discovered a story. Out of the blue, I've discovered a story for my next novel. I don't say what the story is going to be. So somebody from Johannesburg tweets back. The title of that story should be Out of the Blue. Then I tweet them, okay, it's going to be Out of the Blue. You see? And then I was sure that it was going to be Out of the Blue. But then as I was searching, I found out already there are many novels which are called Out of the Blue. Then somebody from Cape Town, whose name was Jason Mda, tweets and says, please name one of the characters Jason Mda. So I said, okay, I'm going to name that main character Jason Mda.
And I'm not sure Jason's going to be entirely pleased.
You said, no, he will be. So,
just so you know, Jason's missing in action. We don't know where Jason is.
What? Then I do then name the character Jason Mda. And I actually tell him that I've named this character Jason Mda and he's not a good guy. Then he says, no, that's great.
He really isn't a good guy.
I'm happy. Now, I have two things from my Twitter people. The main character and the title. But now I had to change the title because Out of the Blue is too much. And then I write to this lady from Joburg. I say, well, can you give me permission then to change it? Because Out of the Blue, then she suggests from the blue, what is this she suggests?
Blue ribbon.
No. It was not really. From Out of the Blue, it was something from the blue or what. But even that one, it was there. It was all over. And then that's when I said, okay, we'll keep the blue part. I'll take the name of the female staring to use the word. I'll take the name of the female staring and then keep the blue. It could be Rachel's blue. So she was still happy that the blue is still there. Now with Jason, I was left with a big problem. How in the hell do we have Jason Mda in Southeast Ohio? Because remember, these characters have historical names. These families, they've lived there for generations, and I must use names of the families that have lived there, I can't just come with a name which does not belong to that region. How do I account for the Klerk? That helped my novel. Because, you see, in Michigan, there's a big community there of Dutch people, which has been there, of course, for generations and generations. So I decided that Jason Mda's father, or grandfather, came from Michigan to work in the coal mines there in Southeast Ohio. So that's how this family of the Klerk came to be there. That gave me that expanded my novel so that when Jason Mda, the rapist, is in trouble, he has somewhere to escape. Where? Michigan. You see that? And also that, the Dutch Reformed Church is involved because Jason's father is the elder of the church and so on. So you see that helped that I used Jason's name. Now Jason existed for some time because I did send him the first chapter. He was still around. After that, he disappeared.
This is the real Jason.
I mean, the real Jason of Cape Town. Then I said, okay, I will leave him alone.
Got into hiding.
When the novel is published, I'm going to contact him and give him a coffee. Maybe he will come to the launch, then I'll give him a coffee. Recently, I tweeted, Jason, where are you, Jason? Our novel is ready now. Jason is nowhere to be found. It's quiet. I don't know where Jason is up to now.